This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're with Suzanne Dion, and we're going to talk to her tonight about Enneagram for understanding one another and loving better. That was a mouthful for me, but I wanted to thank you for being on the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. And how you doing tonight?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Now we ask a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. We ask any guest on the show, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Wow, what motivates me? I've always been interested in human personality and behavior. And as a child, I used to watch adults pretty closely and be kind of like, wow, I wonder why they would say that, or why aren't they just getting along better? And um, I ended up coming along this thing called the Enneagram when I was working in organization development. I had never heard of it. I came by it by total providence, but why I'm so passionate about it is that the ability to understand ourselves from the inside out, have permission to understand ourselves, and to not feel shame when we look at some of the aspects of ourselves that are hard or what gets us in conflict in relationships. I've witnessed it change people's lives, and I've actually taught the Enneagram, this thing called the Enneagram, which I'll explain in a second, in prison and working with the incarcerated, and I literally saw it change their lives. And I'm extremely passionate about putting this in the hands of everybody I possibly can, particularly because the Enneagram is a way to assess myself and know myself. And while I'm a big advocate of all kinds of therapy, the Enneagram is self therapy. It's liberation psychology, as my mentor, Dr. David Daniels, used to call it. It's a way for us to take charge of our own healing. And I love the power of that. So that's why I'm so passionate about this.
You co-authored Enneagram Relationships and Intimacy with your mentor, David Daniels, MD, right?
Yes, I did. David Daniels is a professor at Stanford University, and he's a medical doctor and psychiatrist, and he was also a teacher at Stanford. And he stumbled on this thing called the Enneagram by complete accident. The Enneagram comes from the mystical tradition that also comes from the human potential movement in the 1960s. And it's a way of understanding 9 particular patterns of personality development. We all think we're so completely unique, and we are. Each one of us is very unique and precious. But there's a particular pattern woven into our temperament. So you have people that are really kind of big and direct and loud, and then you have people that are kind of quiet and contained. Well, that's not
Mm-hmm.
an accident. That's wired right into their body. So Dr. David Daniels started to study the Enneagram by accident while he was in clinical practice working a lot with couples. And he's like, my gosh, I've been taking notes about these patterns for years. And here it is. There's a system that actually identifies it with a symbol, which is actually quite ancient. So Dr. David Daniels is my mentor. I started learning the Enneagram from him. And at the end of his life, he's no longer with us. The one thing he wanted to do was write a book about the Enneagram applied to relationships with intimate partner relationships, and also parent-child relationships, and also it affects colleague and working relationships. But that's what he wanted to leave in the world because he saw it make a huge difference in the way people got along with each other.
Yeah, it's very important because, I was a sociology major in the kind of microcosm. There's the book, microcosm, macrocosm concepts of we have the family structure, microcosm, and then
Yeah,
macrocosm. You get to well, yeah, how does that individual fit within a structure, a social structure, like society, like their job, working groups, military, whatever. They get in a bigger group of people. So we like
absolutely.
to study groups and study individuals, but the idea of also like to merge it with this Victorian concept of the looking glass self.
Mm,
But the looking
like
glass
that.
self was something that the poets used. If you think about Wordsworth, Tennyson, Blake, they all had this concept of the looking at the mirror and seeing the other you. And who's
Yes,
that other you? It's like the deeper part that you never want to reveal.
yes,
The part that the creative people, like a lot of artists, got into these Victorian concepts, even as singer songwriters, because you can dive into that. What does a singer songwriter talk about? The
oh,
internal, the
yes,
painful, the
yes,
traumatic, and put it into something as a cathartic exercise in art that actually takes the internal and brings it
yes,
out externally, and then it's out in the world, and it's a
yes.
communication tool. So the idea of kind of weaving because it goes both ways. As an artist, like I have to I create my art, but I want the world to hear it, and then I got to
Yeah.
have that feedback. If I get on stage or I present it, you want to have that two-way street, and you got to
Yes,
be able to kind of take and give good feedback,
absolutely.
bad feedback, whatever. You have to learn
Yeah.
how to handle like the world.
Yes. Yes.
And
You know,
how do you do that?
Phantom, you are talking Enneagram language right now. I'm so excited. Like, there's so many things you said I want to comment on. First of all, just starting with the family system. Each one of us is an aspect of a family system, and family systems are full of different energies. The parenting energy, and all the siblings have a different. I'm going to call it a temperament, but it's also a different energy. And they're contributing to the family in a different way. And then from family branches out to community and your workplace, and then your larger nation even. So we are all part of an integral system. The Enneagram starts with a circle, and the circle represents the system, the whole of humanity. And within that system are these 9 particular temperaments. Each one of them has a particular way that they gift the world. They're wired in their temperament to bring a particular focus of attention to the world that contains in it aptitudes and talent and propensities for bringing something to the human collective that the next person next to them can't bring. So it's really incredible just to see that we're part of a great big system. But the other part you're talking about that's so important is this understanding the inner world of self. And the Enneagram is all about taking us inside. What's going on in my inner terrain? What makes me feel really joyful? What makes me feel shameful? What do I do when I get when I think someone doesn't like me? How do I behave when somebody steps in my territory and takes my stuff? What do I do when my wife says, you've been an a-hole today? How do I respond to that?
You're
Do I right, if
Yeah.
I get triggered? And so the Enneagram not only is about understanding our gifts, our temperamental talent, which it's inborn, by the way. Temperament is not learned, it is inborn, what's called
Mm.
subcortical networks, meaning below the conscious mind. These are kind of down in our nervous system, become inborn. That's why when you look at your brother and your sister, you're like, oh my gosh, we're all so different. Well, how's that possible? We have the same parents. So the temperament is inborn, and understanding that these temperaments not only have gifts and aptitudes and the way my attention gets focused, it also has particular things in my shadow. There's actually a way I suffer myself. So these 9 temperaments have a way of suffering themselves. And what I'm so passionate about is to bring the Enneagram so we can suffer ourselves less. Because my goodness, it's hard enough to be on this planet with the lives that we're all living in 2025. It's hard enough and challenging enough without the challenges coming from inside of me, beating
Yeah.
myself up and feeling ashamed of myself and being resentful because I can't speak up, or, insulting people because I can't help it. I mean, all these things are part of our personality. And some of us really suffer what's going on the inside. So the Enneagram is a profound system for going inward. Just like you said, the face in the mirror, the what did you call it? Looking glass in the mirror.
Looking glass self is this kind of
Looking glass
concept.
out.
Yeah, it's like the other you. And a lot of times some people end up projecting the other you and put it on the other.
That's exactly
It's a whole
right.
another thing. So
Yeah.
then it's like you take like you project your own like your fears, your lack of safety, and you project it and say, well, it's their fault, right? Instead of looking at like, why am I triggered because this person is X?
Yes.
Does that
Yes.
person X have anything to do with me, or is it because I am in certain situations, but I can't take responsibility? I can't look at I don't make mistakes, or if I
Yeah.
make mistakes, I forget about it. I don't learn from it. I don't have any lessons learned. I'm in a loop. I don't get out
Yeah.
of the loop. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times, we kind of live in this modern world, at least in America, is like this resentment game.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, oh, this other is responsible, that their behavior affects me. As like, what does that have to do with me? But
Yeah.
like the existence of some people to some people is
Yes.
actually a cause and effect for their own failings.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
with like, and then I being a political science major, is like it seems like a lot of times we seem to be building on like there were lessons in the 40s. The lessons of the 1940s seem to be like unlearned. And some people
Yeah.
seem to be going back to what feels
Mhm.
safe,
Yeah.
what feels expedient, without thinking about, well, how does that affect my neighbor? How does that affect my town? How does that affect? There's no, like, I'm a software designer, right? And I have to
Mhm.
look upstream, downstream. If I
Yes.
make a foundational change to a program, it actually can affect the inputs, outputs, like what's coming in, what's coming out, what's going up, what's going down. If I
Yes.
just look at it and say, "Well, I just changed this table," but it's a foundational structure, it's a pillar,
Yes.
and I act like it doesn't affect anything else,
Mm.
just like what's in front of me, well,
Yeah.
I wrecked the system
Ah,
of
very nice.
cascading events, and so even though that sounds mathematical, I can apply it to left
Yeah.
brain, right brain. It's like I can apply it to something that's not scientific or not mathematical, not logical. People do that every day.
Yes. Exactly the same patterns you find in personality that you're talking about. And you've just been describing what's called the defense system so well. So each one of our temperaments has a way of defending itself. And believe it or not, it's not that random. Like if I know somebody's 1 through 9, the Enneagram is 1 through 9. So if I know that somebody's a type 5, or I'm a type 1 on the Enneagram, or you might be a type 9 or an 8 or a 3, or, once we know the number that I am, I know exactly how I'm going to defend myself under stress. I know exactly how I'm going to behave. And this is really wonderful in understanding ourselves and understanding who we're involved with, who we're working with, or who we're sharing a life with. But you described something else that's really critical. That that defense system has a level, a quality to it. Some defense systems are kind of marginal and they're very flexible and they have a lot of self responsibility that we saw a lot in the 1940s. Some of these defense systems are very others blaming. I'm not responsible. I do nothing wrong. And they actually can't take responsibility for themselves. We call that low level of developmental well being when the defense system is highly defended and blames everybody else. And it's not my fault. And what you said is so critical. They're only thinking about what's going to serve them and they have to deflect everything else. And they end up wreaking havoc for everybody else and themselves. These are the people that I worked with in prison. They are at these levels of development that are not self-responsible, not self-accountable, and highly defended, and they end up hurting themselves a lot. Now, I want to caveat: what would make somebody have a low level of development? Are we just born with a low level of development? No, chances are we have a low level of development because we came from something in our childhood that was not nurturing, that was neglectful. Our needs were not met properly. We were spoken to poorly. We were criticized or humiliated. And all the way to being severely abused will cause our development to be arrested. We won't develop properly. And this is all the brain science that's happening now. And this is the other reason why I'm a co-founder of something called TAP, the Attuned Parent Project. We're actually going to work with parents to help them minimize some of the mistakes
Yeah.
that we naturally make as parents so that we can have kids that don't grow up with these highly defended systems that end up wreaking havoc in their life.
So do you wonder, like, if people get classes, like, for everything, right? But are people really being trained how to be good parents?
Oh, I
Right?
tell you.
People just assume if they're in some organization, they go to some religious group or they have their grandpa or whatever. But like, do people actually get trained to be a good mother, good father? Right?
Yeah.
Like anything. Like I'm a musician. I get 10,000 hours to learn my piano. You assuming like you're an
Mhm.
athlete, you take 10,000 hours to get that 3-point shot.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks like maybe you should have some prep training for one of the most important human development things ever is bringing a life
Isn't
into the
it?
world, giving them like some kind of a protection wrapper or understanding. And if you
Isn't it
never,
crazy?
yeah, if you never even thought, like your parents didn't do it, so you didn't, you kind of learned by whatever, and your grandparents didn't do it. It's like, well, how are you equipped to do it?
Well, there's a lot of myths, and there's a lot of myths, and one of the myths in child rearing is that we all know how to raise a kid. It's an instinct. That's one of the myths. And what my parents did was just fine. I had someone tell me that in prison. What my parents did was just
Yeah, but
fine. I
why are
said,
you here?
except you're in here. You're locked up for the next 5 years. So, children don't know they're being harmed, and a lot of parents have no idea they're harming children. And it's an education issue. And it's also, there's also a lot of other aspects as parents haven't healed their own trauma before they start having children. We tend to know that we're traumatized. We just think we're just who we are. And then you realize later on through a little bit of education, it's like, oh yeah, my mother never fed us. She was too busy. She was always traveling, and we were staying at home alone. And I remember putting peanut butter in the microwave, and the microwave blew up. And when you start to hear the stories of either
Yeah.
neglect, and I'll tell you, working in the prison system, I heard stories that my imagination could have never come up with. I did not know children were suffering at this level. I sound really naive, but truthfully, the
Yeah.
type of torture and suffering that children endure, and you think, oh, you're just going to turn 18 and go out and have an amazing life after that's what happened to you in childhood. You're going to end up disorganized in the mind, and your feelings are going to be all over the place, or you're completely numb, or you're leaning into alcohol or drugs because the pain inside of you is so great, and of course you're going to end up in trouble. So I'm so passionate about, one, bringing the Enneagram, of course, to the prison system because I've seen it do miraculous things, but I'm really into prevention.
Yeah.
And there are
Prevention
no
is one
programs
before you get there.
before they start. This the parenting programs, they have CPR and they have like basic 101 for parenting, but nobody has a parenting program that works on the parent's internal development of self, which is what allows us to tune into our children better. It's called attunement. Attunement is really, really critical to good parenting. So the child feels seen, heard, guided, and safe. So,
Hmm.
attuned parenting is not children running wild with no boundaries. That's not what attuned parenting is. It's that we tune in so the child feels respected and honored, but safe and protected by the parent, and and uh, and feels heard. But it's a
Hmm.
really, really big thing. And I'll just give you an example too of attunement. We all have our own temperament, right? So I was working with this gentleman. He was a big, strong fellow, and his son was this kind of delicate, artistic, musical little boy who liked to spend a lot of time in his room drawing and writing songs. And he was more of a quiet type. This father really wanted him to be tough and he wanted him to play football. So what he did was he took him out to the football field and he rolled him in football. But this is not the child's temperament.
No.
But,
Yeah.
but the
That's the problem.
isn't that the problem? And then so the child is picking up all the time that my dad doesn't really like who I am. The dad's like, come on, I'm gonna toughen you up and get out of your room and what are you doing? And anyway, he takes him to the football field. It's a true story. He comes back to pick him up after the first day and he's looking at the coach and all the guys are in a big pile up. They're out there doing football and they're looking for this little boy. Where's my son? And he sees his son way over on the side of the field chasing a butterfly. So that's a different temperament.
It's a different
That's
mindset. Yeah, but it's
it's
like
a
like you
different
said,
mindset.
there's no permission structure because like there's this idea with some men today about like masculinity has to
Yeah.
be like over the top.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like you have to be this
yeah,
alpha, you have to be this like and if you have any kind of softer skills,
yeah,
you show any
yeah.
kind of artistic temperament that makes you like a wussy. Yeah, and it's like
That's
being
right.
an artist, I've been into the art since I was like 12. And I
Hmm.
ran into it, and people would make all kinds of statements. And then
Exactly.
if you're an artist, you have to kind of roll off. Like you have to say, well, this is actually important to me
Yes,
that I want to have the vulnerability. I want to have the permission structure to be vulnerable, which
yes,
men tend to not want. But
yes.
until they get to a point where they feel like they can defend being in that space.
Hmm. And
Some
this,
men can never be in that space because they can't
yeah,
feel permission to be in it.
exactly. And one of the things I love about the Enneagram is it gives each person permission to individuate properly. So this young man that I just told you the story about, he did grow up and became a singer and a musician. It was in his heart. And what I love what you're saying is that you gave yourself permission. I want to be vulnerable. This is who I am. And the ownership of self is something Enneagram gives us permission to do because you go, oh, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram or I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. And I know those numbers don't make any sense yet to your readers, but they will after they check this out online or get the book.
Mhm.
Um, but to be given permission to own our true self, even if a parent didn't like our true self. In the case of this really alpha father who wanted an alpha son, he needs to tune into who his son really is and help his son develop fully instead of trying to place his own
You're being
temperament on top of his
disappointed.
son.
Yeah, because I guess he's disappointed they don't want to be an alpha. They don't want to be the quarterback.
That's right. And the child will pick up, my parent is so disappointed in me. What happens to the self esteem of the
Yeah,
child?
that's gonna be a big albatross around your neck because there's
That's
like
right.
because the problem I think a lot of people have the idealism, right? They get these ideal states, right? And people are on a spectrum, and people want to say, well, you're A or B, like you're
Yes.
black and white. There's
Yeah.
tons of grays. Like I'm an artist, like I like to get into the color mixing, like that. The like the idea is you can color sound, right? So you can
Yes.
have different colors of sound. I mean, I get into things like pink noise, brown noise. It's like I'm a synthesis, so I get into really kind of color aspects of sound.
Ooh.
And,
Yes.
and some people who will be like, "Well, that's foo-foo. I don't know what the heck is that." So they get a person who's more black and white. They can't get into it, right? They can't see the gradations. They can't see the spectrum. They just don't yes or no, black or
Yeah.
white.
Yeah.
That's it. Male,
Yeah.
female. There's nothing in between. That's it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've always been like, I don't like getting locked into that. Like I like having maybe neurodivergent. It's like I can't get in the cube. I have to be
Yes.
outside of the cube, outside the bell curve.
Yes. Yes.
And then we
Yes.
get the neurodivergent, and then you get people say, "Well, that's a problem." Like, no, I've run into so many artists that are neurodivergent, and then
Yes.
they kind of found out it's their secret sauce that
It's
it
the
allows them.
superpower. You're
Yeah, it allows
absolutely
them to
right.
be who they are, and then they don't get
Yeah.
shame about it. They don't get fear about it. They actually lean into
That's
it.
right. And they feel okay leaning in instead of there was something wrong with me and my parent didn't love me. If that's the case, didn't that the parent didn't understand that temperament. To be fully who we are is to be allowed to tune into who really what's there. And this is what I found the Enneagram. It's like, oh, I'm this way, and that's why I'm so different than my dad, or I'm so different from my mom, and that's why I'm so passionate about the parenting piece because you have a neurodivergent. We used to call these kids, creative and observant, and we used to call them a lot of different things, about 25 years ago, or little geniuses, or little mathematicians, because they would focus, right? Neurodivergence is a kind of ability to focus in a very unique way. I was talking to a gal yesterday who's neurodivergent. She, from a very young age, recognized patterns. Like she would watch a
Yeah,
crowd of people and she would immediately notice how many were standing on one leg, how many on both legs. She would immediately see all the different patterns of the way people were standing, and then she started seeing similarities in the way they carried their body. I mean, it was amazing listening to her that her mind could
yeah,
immediately
we
tune
find people
into
like
that.
that in IT. We get people in their actuaries that are code, in the
Yeah.
CIA, NSA. They get into code. They do the code breaking because they can
Well,
find the patterns.
they like find the patterns. It's
And they
pattern
figure out the
recognition.
algorithms and figure out the structure for the algorithms.
Yes.
Because like a lot of times people have started to find in the neurodivergence
Yep.
very specific skill sets that are necessary for our modern era,
Yes.
especially like
Absolutely.
in information design, like
Yes.
foundational design. You find
Absolutely.
tons of people like this. I work with them all the time. Like
Wow. Yeah.
they're in these areas because they can just boom, they can just see it. You're on a whiteboard, they just boom, find it, figure out the structure, immediately see a problem. They go right to the root cause analysis. They cut through the noise and they get right to it. And it's like everybody else is sitting there and like they can't figure it
Yep.
out. But
Yep.
this guy over here, he always sees the pattern. He always
Yes.
finds. And it's like there are places for that, and there are people that say, well, you got to be the quarterback mindset.
Yep. Yep.
That kind of outward, like that isn't always the one that's suited for every job. If you
It's
got some people
not.
thinking that that's the person for every job is that person, and that's not the case.
That's right. That's right. And it's not to make that kind of person wrong when you try to put them in a place where that doesn't utilize their mind to its greatest extent, right? And
Yeah.
I just want to add that what you're talking about, whoever recognized the Enneagram, these 9 temperaments, the symbol that goes along with it, which the symbol is thousands of years old to
Mhm.
recognize energy patterns. The Enneagram is based on patterns, that everything in the universe is based on sequenced mathematical patterns. That is
That makes a lot of
spiritual
sense.
law.
Yeah, it
And
makes
the
a lot of sense.
Enneagram is right. And so when your audience, I hopefully they'll get excited about this. If they get excited about studying the Enneagram, oh boy, are they going to start recognizing the patterns across human beings. You know, in the Enneagram, these 9 temperaments, you can go to England, you find them there. You go to Japan, you find them there. They're, it's repeated
Human
reliably all over the world.
human societies, like different cultures found it, right? They found it at different points in time.
That's right. That's
And
exactly
I
right.
think it's like because the curious people, the human brain will go there, right? If you allow people to actually investigate, and when you have different golden areas of different civilizations, golden eras, where the
Yes.
people actually had thought leadership or critical thinking, and they actually started saying, "Why is this?
Yes.
Why
Yes.
did this happen?" And you get the people, in Eritrea, or the Romans and the Greeks, and
Yeah.
all the different societies, Egypt,
Yeah.
anywhere on the planet, like different indigenous tribes, Mayans,
Yes.
Aztecs. They figured things out. They figured patterns. They
They
saw
saw the
patterns
pattern.
in the stars. They saw patterns in the weather. They saw patterns all over the place, and they start to, well, why? The
Yeah.
scientific method, like whether it's scientific method, but this kind of curiosity that's kind of
Yes.
innately human.
Curiosity is it's like it's an instinct. It's a big emotional system in all mammals. And I love what you said, that why question. Gee, why do some people explode when they get angry and other ones go real quiet? Why is that? Well, there's a
Yeah,
pattern there. It's not random. It's not accidental. There's something in the nervous system controlling that. Oh, people's nervous systems are different. What's the patterns in the nervous system? Oh, what's the patterns in the emotional system? Ooh, what's the pattern? And, and it keeps going. And the more I study this thing called the Enneagram, the more excited I get, the more extraordinary I realize this thing with this interesting name is. Ennea means 9 in Greek, and gramma means drawing. It refers to the 9-pointed star. It's a drawing, sacred symbol that represents the 9 patterns and how they all interrelate and how they all actually have a path of development. So it's not about just finding out your pattern, it's having permission to know your pattern, fall in
mhm,
love with reverence about your pattern, about your way of defending and your way of pursuing a good life, and then expanding it so that you have a lot of flexibility in how you choose to react to life rather than it's always the same default
trigger.
reaction. It's like, God, I did it again. Ah, I told myself I wouldn't do that
Like
again.
bad loops, like you get these
Like
bad
you
loops.
said, the
Yeah, but
bad
a lot of
loop.
times people get into
Exactly.
these patterns, and they could have been very early childhood.
Yeah.
Somebody said you're not good enough. And then you
Oh,
felt, he started getting into this thing. Well, you put things off, you don't complete it because you're never gonna actually do it right anyway. So then you get in this
yeah.
loop, and
Yeah.
then you're never good enough, and then you can
Yeah.
become a people pleaser. All these different things. You fall into these loops
Yeah.
until you get a critical mass, and maybe you blow up or you hit the crash, and you say, "Well, why am I? Why is this happening?" And then you start to actually look for people like yourself, or you look for ideas to
Yeah.
understand the self. And that goes
Yeah.
back to like the looking glass self or the self analysis, or you need help,
Yeah.
that you
It
can't
goes
do it
right
by
back to
yourself
that.
because we're social beings.
Yes. And we
But we're
need
kind of
each
told,
other.
yeah, but we're told with this individual, like a Horatio Alger myth, you can
Hmm.
be like, you're gonna be the big rich guy in Citizen Kane. You're gonna end up in it. But what happened to him? Like
Yes.
it ended, it's like with the big billionaire, he's in by himself, like Howard Hughes. It's like
Yes.
it's like sometimes like what you want is not what you want. Like
Ooh, that's
is
powerful. That's
what
right.
did you what do you actually need?
That's
Because
right.
what you
What you
want
want
will
is
be
not what you need.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like $1 million
Yeah.
will just cause
Yeah.
you to look to the 2 million. We'll do the 3 million, and the foundational, you're still not happy.
Yes. Yes. We have ascensions that we would teach when we were working in prison, and we would say, it's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you? What happened to you that sat on top of your temperament that you had to find solutions for? So your temperamental design is right there, ready to form a solution to any kind of pain or your needs not getting met or someone telling you you're not good enough. This thing's going to organize some kind of solution to try to protect you from that pain. So it's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you and what kind of defenses do you have and who do you really want to be and what do you want to free yourself from inside so that we can have a better life, so we can get along with people better, so that we won't feel so ashamed every time we walk into a room and we think everyone's
Mhm.
looking at us and they don't like us. I mean, it's amazing the things I've heard, and also learned about myself that we carry inside of ourselves that we don't even question because we just think that's normal me. And we go, oh, I don't have to feel like that. I don't have to feel less than every day of my life. So it's an incredible opportunity to be given a chance to learn about self without having to go and get a psychology degree. How many of
Well, I
us have a
think
chance for that, right? And the prison system, how many of these guys or women are going to get out of prison and go have a nice therapist for a few years and
yeah,
figure out
you
what
really need.
happened,
Well, the thing
right?
is, like the society, we're willing to throw so many people away.
Yes,
In a
it's so
society
sad.
that lets people get, like it's not very efficient, it's not very effective, and it doesn't ensure the security of any of us, right?
No.
To if you have a world
Oh,
where people are not able to self-actualize,
that's
right?
right.
It's very inefficient, right? It's
Yep.
like your GDP is not going to be high. If you want to measure your success in GDP, well, if you have people that are not self-actualizing or not in the place they're supposed to be, right?
Yes.
That they don't
Yes.
feel safe, they feel threatened, and they cause incidents.
Yep.
There's random actors, they cause these, and you're talking about the prison system, they causing these crimes, causing damage to themselves and other people, causing how
Yes.
many, like, so if you actually had figured out, like, maybe those parents should have been taught how to be parents, then they would
Yeah.
have never got there. But you thought that was like, oh, just suck it up. I'm not going
That's
to put
right.
resources there because I need to put resources to build the prison.
Right. Right.
Maybe you need to put the resources to teach the parents so they don't end up in the prison.
That's right. In the Scandinavian countries, they pay for the mother to stay home for 2 full years paid. And their philosophy is that if we pay the mother for 2 years, and the father gets 6 months, by the way, paid leave, we will prevent crime later on. This is
That's
their
well thought out.
philosophy. Isn't that amazing? They
Well, that's a
know
well
that
thought
that
out,
first,
connected. That's a very
yeah,
connected society versus the person that says, "I'm going to build more cells."
yes, exactly,
Right. So you get
exactly.
this mindset where you have somebody that is going to be reactionary instead of preventative.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So like I gotta deal with it after the fact. Tends to be an American mindset. Is like I am not going to invest in fixing the dam. I'll wait till it breaks.
Yes.
I'll,
Yep.
I'll wait till the bridge. The bridge is structurally deficient. It's been structurally
Hmm.
deficient for 30 years. It didn't fall down today, so I'll let it go another 20 years.
That's right. It's the same thing with our health. We do the same thing with our health. It's all about taking a pharmaceutical. I don't mean to get anybody in trouble here, but taking a pharmaceutical after I'm already so sick because the prevention piece isn't in our mindset in with the mass population in the diet and the food and prevention is really an extraordinary place to put resources. I'm all for it. That's why prevention of what I witnessed happen to these kids in prison, to these men and women in prison, if we can prevent 5%, we could make a difference on the front end. The brain is saved. You do it right for the first 3 years. You really nurture the brain, meet the needs in infancy, set up the safety system, get a secure enough base.
Hmm.
Knowing yourself, use the Enneagram to know who you are, know how you respond, know what irritates you, know how you get triggered, and you work on that the whole time your baby's up until 3 or 4 years old. You've got a really good chance at that baby having had good enough parenting for a secure base that could prevent so much adult pain later on.
Also, like when it comes to intimacy, before you even have the kid, are you in the right relationship? Are you with the right partner? Because like a
It's
lot of times, I grow up, you talk to my grandparents, talk to my parents, great grandparents. Well, sometimes it's like they didn't really have too much of a choice. They kind of like they got put together
true.
and they got stuck together, and it's like, well, I guess like we got to deal with it, right?
It's
And
true.
and so now today's like, there's more freedom, but still falling into a pattern. It's like, are you actually with somebody that actually you should be with? But your
Yeah,
parents might actually not have been a good fit. Your
that's
grandparents
right.
might not have been a good fit. So it's like it's not surprising that you're actually going to go and have a bad fit too.
The relationship piece between a couple, it starts right there. You're absolutely right. And then, of course, when two people come together, they bring all their childhood stuff with them, and then they try to. The other person's supposed to fix all that pain, right? And we put that
The
on the other
soulmate,
person.
yeah,
Then we
the
get
soulmate
mad
fixes it all.
when they start getting disappointed. You're not getting me out of my pain, and and that creates a real that creates a lot of pain and suffering for children too when we come into a home with the two parents that are fighting and can't work out their stuff before they have children. The relationship is absolutely where we start. And actually, this book that with David Daniels is the Enneagram relationship and intimacy was really popular with dating. It actually was number one as a book for dating, not number one in the world, but it was that was the category that was it
Well, it
was
makes
very
sense.
popularized. Yeah, so that people can start out knowing their partner, and instead of saying, "What's wrong with you? You don't see it my way. What's wrong with you? You explode. I don't explode. I hold it in."
Well, now
That was me, by the way.
we have all these apps and people date, and when they don't see their ideal mate, then they just drop and go to another one, and drop, go to another one, and
Right.
drop.
That's
So
right.
now we
You're
just
too
have this thing
difficult.
with drop, 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 but then you never actually stick with anything, and then
It's
you're not
so
actually,
true.
how much of this information you're getting is surface level and not true or not whatever. The people put whatever face they're going to put forward, and whatever you see on your screen
That's right. Well,
is
now it's
is
just like just swipe right or swipe left or
yeah,
whatever. Right?
yeah.
Like next,
Next,
next.
next, next.
Yeah,
Well, then you're never going to stick with anything, and not that you should stick with something that doesn't work,
that's
but
right.
like people's attention span and willingness to stick with anything. And I was talking to authors, like they can't write a 200,000 word book; they got to write a 70,000 word book. Musicians, we can't write a 5 minute song; we got to write a 2 minute song. If you post, you got to do a 15-second, 30-second reel because nobody's going to watch a 10-minute reel. So
Yes,
it's like the people are not willing to listen for any length of time,
yeah,
and how much can you actually absorb
yeah.
in 15 seconds, 30 seconds? What are
Exactly.
you
You're
actually
yeah.
getting?
You're talking about the modern brain. I mean, this is actually changing the brain. This short term, quick impulse, immediate fix, immediate satisfaction, long form learning, long form marriage. Like you said, go back to the 1920s when you got married. They barely knew each other, by the way, when they got
Yeah,
married.
you're in
The
there.
commitment happened at the marriage, and then they realized this other person's defense system is totally scary. They worked it out, and it wasn't easy, there's no doubt, but they wouldn't give up nearly as easy as today. And as soon as things don't feel happy and nice, and anytime you get in a relationship and you meet a defense system of another person, it's not going to be easy all the time, and the giving up factor is dominating right now, and it is very impactful for children that
Yeah,
we
that this
can't
is going to
sustain.
cascade and cause even more damage and more
Yeah,
instability. So it seems like society can get very unstable when there's no
yeah,
sense of grounding, right? Like if you
that's
don't
right.
know you have any sense of family history, you have no sense of stability. I grew up, my parents, they stayed married. Dad passed away, man. They just stayed married their whole, they didn't divorce. My father died of Alzheimer's, and my mom is still here, but like they didn't, that's like untypical now. People would have gone through.
Right.
Like my older brother, he's had three wives. Is like I kind of stuck. I've been married to my wife for like 25 years, so I'm kind of trying to
Wow.
follow the same pattern. And it's hard. It's not easy because like people change. Who I was 25 years ago is not the same person I'm now, and my wife is the same person.
Yes.
You have to kind of be an adult. But I don't know how people can be adults today. It's like, and maybe that's not the right term, but like, nothing's perfect, and
Nothing. And
people are always looking for perfection. It's a perfection trap, and I'm more of like happy accident. Things don't work, but you learn. Lesson
yes,
learned, right?
yes, yes.
Like it doesn't have, you can have little wins. You don't have to win the whole thing. You have little wins each day. You can compromises. You don't have to be the one on top. You don't have to win every argument. Why does it have to be an argument?
Yeah. Well, I'm
You
hearing you
know?
have a lot of flexibility. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you kind of navigate. And some people, when they have more flexibility, we get along better. Those who are more rigid, I have to win. I have to be right. You're wrong. When the more rigidity you get, the less easy it is to sustain the relationship. The more flexibility we tend to have in understanding one another, compromising, letting go sometimes setting a boundary, we tend to be a little more successful. And that's something that the Enneagram goes into, which, some types are setting boundaries easily and other types have a really hard time setting boundaries. And how does that play out with each other, right? And
Yeah, it's like a balance. It's like,
learning
but
where
being
the
a
limit
Buddhist,
is.
everything kind of about balance. I'm like, if I would Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, And the idea, like we chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, but we have this place to get rid of the noise. I
Yes.
try to center myself, get rid of the noise, and sometimes I'll chant. Sometimes I'll go for a walk in the woods and be chanting in the woods, or just not always in front of my altar. But the idea that I can get rid of my cell phone and iPad and my wearable and just focus on my breathing and do like a
Hmm.
Tai Chi type of thing. Sometimes I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I did used to go to middle of the day and see the salarymen doing Tai Chi, right?
Yes.
And going and drinking green tea
Yeah.
and just doing different things than Americans do, right? In terms
Yeah.
of they're kind of decompressing
Yes. Yes.
and doing it during the day. And these
That's
guys are like
wonderful.
they're super capitalists, like they're working hard, but they would
They,
take the time to go for that walk to do the Tai Chi, and they would have these breaks. That the American bosses I was working with, I was an expat. They were like, why are they doing that? How come they're not at their desk? It's like, well, this is a
wow.
different culture. It's a different thing. And they were like,
Wow.
they were like, they couldn't get it. Like,
I'm
like,
so glad to hear that. That's wonderful that they're taking that up in Japan because probably 20, 30 years ago you wouldn't have seen that there. They were the salary man. I spent a lot of time in Japan too. Salary man and the smoking. It's changed
yeah,
a little bit, right? It sounds like they're taking care of themselves a little better. That's amazing.
yeah.
That's
It's just,
inspiring.
yeah. I think you just have to eventually hit the wall. Like, eventually, you have to find healthier ways to handle things,
Yes.
and find ways to navigate. And it's like the concepts you're talking about are super important because like we live in an age like the blame game. It's
Yeah.
always it's like it's this, it's that, it's outside myself,
Hmm.
and like it's a quick fix. It's a
Yeah.
magic pill. It's a
Yeah.
magic potion. It's a magic lotion. It's magic this.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
like you can do it in 10 easy steps. You get it done in 30 days. It's like, what from my experience is like it takes the work, to actually learn my piano and learn my bass guitar. I had to actually work at it.
That's right. 10,000 hours, right, to become
Yeah.
proficient and
You got to
for
do it.
mastery.
And nobody wants to hear you in the first 100 hours.
No, not whatsoever. And when you tell people when they want to get in shape, and you say, in about getting in shape takes about a year, or I'm working with someone right now who's had some trauma. It takes about 2 years to recover the self. 2 years? 1 year? Are you kidding? I want they want it right now. Like,
It's
these
like,
really valuable things take time, but once they're there, they're there.
yeah, it becomes
They're
sustainable.
there.
Like if you can actually do it for the time that's necessary to learn or remap yourself, like
Yes,
retrain your brain out of
exactly.
the bad loop.
Yes.
Then once you do it, it will become like the muscle memory, and I don't have to look at my bass guitar. And people wonder, like, how can I not have to look at it? Because I know it. I
Yes.
know where all those notes are. I don't have to look at it.
Isn't that
Right. So
amazing?
when you
That's
get,
mastery.
yeah, when you know where they
Hmm.
are, I can do it with like not even looking at it. Right. Like then
Yeah.
that's where you can get to. You can see it with
Yes.
athletes. They can get to these plays that they just have done it so many times. They can do it on demand, any
That's
kind of
right.
angle. They can figure it out.
That's
You know,
brain body intelligence, right? And the defense system works the same way. You can train the body brain intelligence to hold that defense structure differently, where it actually relaxes, meaning you don't suddenly feel with all this hormones and cortisol and you're exploding. You can actually train holding it. It's an aspect of body intelligence and somatic intelligence. Same
it's
like
more like a
self
flow.
mastery. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
self
it's like a
mastery versus
flow.
guitar
Yeah, like
mastery.
if you're
Mhm.
learning like martial arts, a lot of things are like flow and not
Yep.
jarring. You
Yes.
learn these kind of flow moves. They're kind of very elegant, feels like
Absolutely.
dancing. So you
Yes.
feels
Yes.
like so you're more in tune, and it's not jarring, and it feels
Hmm.
like you're more connected,
Yes.
and you
Beautiful.
start you look at a mantis, you see, all these praying mantis, you look at, like, all these different things that people looked at nature. They looked at
Yes.
cranes, they looked at mantises, they looked at these animals,
Yes.
and then they started to see, well, these animals have these movements, what happens if I do these movements? So this having this intelligence to actually
Yeah.
observe and apply
Hmm.
what was
Yes.
already in nature,
Yes.
and see that you could actually apply those some of these same movements, and you're not a crane, you're not a mantis, you're not a spider, you're not a snake, but you could actually look at them and learn patterns and learn things.
Yes, the intelligence is right there in nature. And Aikido, I don't know if you probably tuned into Aikido, Japanese movement, judo, but it's
Mhm.
all about lovingly moving energy
Yeah.
instead of jarring, instead of confrontation. You actually just move the energy that's coming at you in a
Yeah,
different way.
resistance. You can, like, kinda resist things and do it in a really kinda take any kinda negative action, kinda get like, have it roll off of you or
Yeah.
take advantage of it and kind of turn it on its face because you
Yep.
can take energy and kind of invert it or
Yes.
convert it,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
it's like this inversion and conversion,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this
you
is
can take
exactly
negative
what you're
energy
doing.
and flip it to positive energy and flip it back and flip it this way and flip it that way. And,
Yes.
I do a lot of sound design. I do a lot of things like inverting signals, converting signals,
Interesting.
and turning like a sine wave into a ramp wave and inverting the wave and taking a square wave and inverting the wave and then seeing what happens when you cross wave and the different waveforms actually match frequencies in nature. From like I
Exactly.
find waveforms that mirror wind, that
Yep.
mirror ocean waves, that mirror, like all
Wow.
different types of waves. And then when you can see human behavior
Yes.
as a musician, when you do certain waves or certain patterns, you could do a pattern that causes like a mosh pit for a grunge punk band, or you could do a pattern that's symphonic and making people elevated in an orchestral like Chopin or something,
Yes.
or you can do something that's getting people waving like an Elton John song, you know, waving
Yeah.
their thing. Like you can affect people in
Yes.
real time, right in the moment, based on the frequencies and patterns you put out.
And it affects our frequency.
Yeah.
We're operating at a particular frequency also. These different Enneagram points, the different defense systems, they're all operating at a particular frequency. And so self mastery is about starting to move those energies, move those frequencies, elevate the frequency from guilt and resentment up
Mhm.
to joy and gratitude. These are completely different energetic states and
Yeah,
they're
'cause you have
different
the voice
frequencies.
that's inside voice
Yeah.
frequency, you have your outside voice, right?
Hmm.
And your voice is an instrument.
Yes,
So
it
if
is.
you're talking to yourself at a bad frequency or a frequency that's not going to really be productive, it's
Yes.
negative energy, it's not going to
Yeah,
get you anywhere
that's right.
versus having a more hopeful tone.
Exactly.
And then when you're out there and you're speaking, like your voice has patterns like poetry. You get
It's
into
a,
iambic pentameter, and you see some poetry is so musical. And you see
yes,
some orators can talk in patterns that are very poetic,
absolutely. And the
and they can
sound.
actually mesmerize the
Mhm.
audience and get them tight. You
Yes,
can listen to John F. Kennedy's cadence, or you
yes,
listen to FDR's cadence.
yes,
And then
yes,
you look at like Hitler's cadence or Stalin's cadence, they see different
yes,
results.
yes. You definitely do. That's my associate out there. Whoops.
Oh, that's all
No,
right.
and when people don't even realize that they are talking to themselves in a low frequency negative that's so normalized inside their mind. And then just coming back to the Enneagram for a second, the Enneagram allows you to start to witness with that mirror, witness how you are actually talking to yourself and to start questioning it. And actually, we have the power to change it or interact with it. But until we notice it,
Mhm.
question it, we have no power to impact it at all. It just goes on like normal. We're just on
Very
automatic.
subconscious, because 'cause we're always kinda running on a subconscious pattern, and unless you actively remap or reprogram like a computer,
Yeah,
you're gonna be
exactly.
locked into whatever that is until you
That's
challenge it,
right.
right? Until you actually assess it.
Until you challenge it. And you need something to support that challenge because the challenge won't feel normal. It'll feel weird or it'll feel wrong or uncomfortable, but actually the Enneagram gives you permission to start challenging some of what might have become normalized for you and give you the confidence to start playing with it differently. So
So there's all these subtypes. I don't know if we got time to get into that. We still got maybe 10 minutes. But you talk in your there's these subtypes for anagrams for couples. And you said there were like 27 subtypes I see in the reference. That seems like a lot. It might be too much to go into, but maybe kind of high level. what subtypes are and how they apply to
Mhm.
like relationships.
So what a subtype is, it's actually your Enneagram type when it mixes with a particular instinct. We have three dominant instincts. So what does that mean? Instincts are patterns for survival. They're instinctual reflexes that will guarantee you survive. So on the base of the Enneagram, the base of our personality is that we have to survive on this planet. We got to survive existentially, meaning I got to stay away from bears and lions and storms, but I have to also survive people. I have to survive the people that are trying to love me. I have to survive as a self-esteem. I have to survive as an identity. And these instincts are actually trying to assure both existential and ego survival. So there's three instincts. One is called self-preservation instinct, which is all about preserving my material resources, preserving shelter, food, water, warmth, comfort, that I have enough to survive materially. That's called self preservation instinct. The second one is called the sexual or one to one instinct. And this is the instinct to bond and connect deeply with something passionately, another person. As long as I have this one key special other person in my life and we're completely devoted and intensely connected, I will survive. And then the third one is called the social instinct. And the social instinct, as long as I am known, I've got positioning or status, I've got a good network, people know me, I'm connected, I contribute, as long as I have those people group and I'm somebody in this group, I will survive. So those are the three instincts: self preservation, sexual or one to one, social. So if we take type one, my Enneagram type one, and let's say I'm a sexual one to one subtype, which I am, we call myself a sexual one sexual is the subtype, sexual subtype one. So the subtype is my Enneagram type one mixing with the sexual mating instinct, and that kind of colors my Enneagram type a little bit. It gives it certain qualities, versus a self-preservation one. The subtype self-preservation one is much more rigid than the sexual type one, much more worried about the food, the table, what I'm serving, the house, the cleaning. They're really focused on really tangible things. And for me, a type one, because I'm a perfectionist, type one happens to be the perfectionist, the crusader, reformer. Instead of me wanting a perfect table, I want a perfect partner. So
Mhm.
I start wanting to fix him instead of fixing the table. So I might do both, but I'll get really irritated if he shows up and says the wrong thing versus my table not being quite perfect. So the
Yeah.
subtypes affect kind of where we get really neurotic.
What you're looking at, like it would, so you like somebody could look at the room and think it's a mess, and somebody else could not even see it. Right? They might not see a pattern. They might be focused on the person that's in the room. They're
That's
a mess.
right.
They're a
That's
mess.
right. That's
They're
right.
not concerned about the mess on the table. I'm concerned about the mess that's happening with them.
That's exactly right. And the social subtype, it's like every week the social subtype has got to put energy into groups, and I got to be seen. If I'm not seen and people don't remember me, I won't be okay. So try to get a social subtype to stay home and have dinner with you privately every single night. They're going to want to invite people over. They're going to want to going out. So
Oh,
you
you
can
go to
imagine how this creates conflict in relationships if you have a social subtype, one of them, and then the other one's a self-preservation subtype. The subtypes, we can get quite fearful and neurotic when we can't take care of our particular subtype. So if I can't get my partner to behave perfectly at a dinner party, I'll get real obsessed about it. And a social subtype, if they can't get to their group in a given week or 2 weeks, they'll start to get kind of nervous. So it's these subtypes kind of gear where we spend our time and where we put a lot of our energy, and we can get kind of mad when we can't tend to the subtype energy. So we'll start to feel like we won't survive, which is in the subconscious. We have to survive. We're driven for survival. So the subtypes are really important when you're dealing with couples. It really
Yeah,
shows up in
probably a lot of
couples.
people probably don't even know what type they are or why they're kind of on cruise control, or they're like locked into a pattern they might not fully understand
Yeah.
until you explain to them what type they
Right.
are and what
Yeah.
subtype they are. And
Yeah.
then, they probably never have this conversation
That's right.
about like why they're disappointed.
Yes,
They,
right.
they,
Why
they
are you
probably never
disappointed?
really fully communicate. That's why I've always saw like with relationships and people, like even if you have a conversation, listening skills. Are you actually listening to what your partner said? Or are you thinking about the response to what they said 5 seconds ago and not
That's
hearing
right.
what they're saying right now?
That's right. That's right. That's not active listening, is it? That's a different kind of communication, right? And that can leave people feeling unheard and unfelt. And again, what you're saying is so true. When we have a different subtype, we can accuse the other of not being what we want, or we can be disappointed in the other. Why are you going to Costco again on Saturday? I wanted to spend time with you today. Well, the self preservation person who's going to go to Costco on Saturday doesn't want to be taken away from that task, even though the sexual one-to-one person wants to spend time with you and they don't want it, they want to go to Costco. So it kind of creates a tunnel vision of behavior that we can get disappointed in each other if we don't understand these things.
Yeah, they have these big rifts. This, it might be a little rift, and then over
Yeah,
5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it comes
that's
like
right.
this
That's
big
right.
rift. You're not in the same. You're
Yeah.
sleeping in two different bedrooms.
Yeah, and it creates different values. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, look, our values can be real different. Yeah, I value spending time with you. Well, I value making sure we have enough to survive. It's like talking two different languages, and
Yeah,
neither
so
one is right or wrong.
yeah, because then you get people like they're focused on the children,
Uh huh.
but then they don't have focus on they're focused on bringing them to the soccer, bringing them to the ballet, doing this, but then like, no, we don't have time to go to Bermuda because
Yeah.
John's got to go to the soccer game and she's got her side, so we're gonna focus on that until they're not
Yeah.
doing that, and then people start drifting off
Yeah.
because they fit like sometimes like you got to try to fit so much in, but there has to be communication about like what are your expectations, what are your needs, and some people say, well, the responsibilities rides over your need, but
Yeah.
does it really? Because
Yeah.
then there's still a resentment because you're doing your obligation, and then you
Mhm.
still resent that you didn't actually satisfy your needs.
And I'll tell you, resentment is a really insidious, slow brewing deconstructor. And so many people are living with resentment. Slowly, slowly, it builds and builds, and it can really contaminate a relationship. So, learning how to spot resentment, talk through it, set your boundaries, declare your needs, but also be able to soothe yourself when your needs don't get met. To learn how to self soothe is a really important aspect of being in a relationship, because another human being will never be able to keep us completely out of pain. It's
Yeah, that's a
impossible, right?
soulmate. Maybe the expectation that your soulmate is going to satisfy everything,
Everything.
which
That's
it seems
right.
to be like a thing that people go into thinking it's going to be some black and white movie with Audrey Hepburn or some romantic thing with
Exactly.
Bogart and Bergman. It's like it's going to be
Right.
this magical romance thing. It's like, well, that doesn't even happen in a movie that long.
Yeah.
Okay, it
That's right.
happens for moments and then it goes away.
Yes.
It's
It,
like people want it to not go away, but like sometimes it's
yeah,
not always there, right?
that's
Eh,
right.
how do you deal with it when it's not at the
That's
peak,
right. And if
right?
it's not at the peak, do you panic? If it's not at the peak, do you start to feel abandoned? If it's not at its peak, do you start to get angry? Like what happens? Can you traverse those moments and stay stable or not? And a lot of that depends on our childhood and our
Yeah,
attachment experience, what we didn't talk about. But can we tolerate a little bit of pain to get to the other side? And some people can't tolerate pain very well, meaning the pain of my ego, the pain of my need not getting met, the pain of not getting enough attention. Some of us can't tolerate that very long before we kind of dysregulate and start starting an argument or getting resentful, or right, which is all
mhm.
what harms relationships instead of helps.
Or
Um,
like disengagement. Like
yeah,
what happens when people get to total disengagement? They're not, it still becomes like psychologically could be damaging, right? Because you're not actively doing something mean, right? You're not physically doing, but you're not. Yeah, it's like it's ignoring somebody, right? Or ignoring a need, and just saying, well, then you don't talk about it. then you just have like
Disengagement
total
is
disengagement. What happens there?
Disengagement is at the very end. Once there's disengagement or apathy, where the person just stops caring and they disconnect, probably the most painful thing to go through, because at that point, when there's no at least juice or desire to connect, the relationship is in serious, serious trouble.
Hmm.
That's when an intervention is needed to save it at that point. A lot of marriages and relationships end right at the point of disengagement. That's it. They don't care anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Better to
exactly.
actually be in a heated argument that's a little bit of yelling than to have disengagement and apathy. That's really hard to recover from.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, well, you can see it in patterns with society. People, such high divorce rates,
Yeah. It's
and there's some people.
60%.
Yeah, this something's broken,
Yeah.
so people have to look at what's the root cause.
And that's hard. That if the root cause is it's all your fault, then I'm at a level of development that can't take responsibility or even look at myself. And that's where I'm pretty much powerless. If I can't look at myself, it's everybody else's fault. That leaves me without any power. That
Yeah,
leaves me without any self responsibility. And that kind of leaves me handicapped, in my view. So this is some of the things we work on with people with the Enneagram, to empower the full self to develop and to be able to hold self with sovereignty. A lot of love, good healthy boundaries, good communication skills, so that we can have longer lasting and more fulfilling relationships.
I think that's real important today, because you really kind of have to have like a safe place in your life. You would hope that your relationship is a safe place. Um,
Absolutely.
but I want to. It always goes by quicker than we ever imagined. We hit the hour, but we do have your Suzanne Dion .com. So we always like to mention like the URL. If people click on your URL, what do they find there?
Wonderful. That's my website. It's all about the Enneagram and self development. You can find the book there. You'll also find a link to drdaviddaniels.com, which is my mentor's website, which is full of all kinds of Enneagram information and his teachings as well. And I welcome you to reach out, email, contact me anytime if you have questions. I'm available, and love to bring this into the hands of anybody that I can.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing all this with the audience today. We were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. That link below, SuzanneDion.com, is fully clickable in the podcast description on those networks. We will be publishing to multiple channels like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, many more. By tomorrow, we will provide a landing page to your audience, and they will be able to pick whatever platform they like. So that's
Wonderful.
what we'll have by tomorrow. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast, and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fenton, for having me. Have a great weekend too.
Thank you.